I'm George, and this is a companion video to my presentation, AI for the Beekeeper Made Easy, from the 2026 South Carolina Beekeepers Association Spring Conference. It's about NotebookLM and how it can make you a more efficient beekeeper, as well as help you with things such as doing research, presentations, studying for your beekeeping certification, and even logging. So let's get started. So the first thing you want to do is you're going to go to Google Gemini. And the way you do that is you would just type in Gemini in your browser and it would take you straight there. Then if you go down here to Settings and Help, and you'll see a NotebookLM entry right there. Now this is recorded in January 19th, 2026. So if you're watching it much later than that, this may move around a little bit. You can always do a search for NotebookLM directly. Then that will bring you to this screen here. Now, if you've got some notebooks in here from the past, they would show up here as well. But we're kind of starting with a clean slate. So the first thing you want to do is you want to create a notebook. So go ahead and click on that. And it prompts you to go ahead and start the notebook. But we're going to close this because I want to talk about the various settings and configuration and everything that we can do for this to make it work a lot better for us and so that we better understand what's going on. So the first thing we're going to look at is the settings up here. And it's this little gear. And most of this is the standard stuff you see in just about every program. There's two things in particular I want to talk about. First off is Discord. Discord is kind of a community, if you're not familiar with it, much like Facebook, use group back in the day, if that rings any bells, where you can log in and you can chat with people, ask them questions, those kinds of things. It's all kinds of different rooms. It's free to use. They post updates about Notebook in there, the developers do, so it's a really great resource. The next thing I want to talk about here is the device settings, and that's where you can set the mode of your notebook. You can either set it to device, which is kind of the default, or you could set it to light, or in this case I'll change it, there's dark mode. So I'm going to go ahead and set it just to device. So the next thing we're going to want to do is go to settings, and this kind of has some basic settings to help you configure how NotebookLM outputs and interacts with you. So the first thing is your conversational style. Do we want to have it kind of as a learning guide? Do we want it more of a default? Or do we want to customize it? And you can customize, and it has some examples here as well. So you kind of build your environment, or build your persona that you want the responses and whatnot to address and also be crafted in that persona, right? So I've got one I've already worked on here. So we're gonna drop that in here. And I'm gonna kind of explain why I did it and what I did. So first off, I have my age. That's probably not that important, but I like to include that. Second is my location, and that is very important because when you start talking about things like varroa treatments or buttoning your hives up for the winter, those kinds of things, this is important because, as we all know, beekeeping is very local, and what may work for someone in Maine is not going to work for me in South Carolina. The second here is I also included some information about our temperatures. So once again, they can it can craft, or it can customize it to me. And one thing I'm going to add here as well is the fact that our winters are very mild. Next off, the number of hives I have, so it can kind of, am I a commercial beekeeper, am I a sideliner, am I a hobbyist? I'm technically a hobbyist right now. And I want to use soft or naturally derived chemicals. I prefer not to use the synthetic ones. And then I also want to talk about IPM and how things fit into there. And then this next thing is how long does it want my response to be? The default is kind of a conversational response. A longer would be something along the lines of a really in-depth research paper, and then a shorter might be if you just want a really quick answer. You can kind of experiment with those. So we're going to go ahead and save that. Now, over here at the right, you'll see the studio, and we'll talk about everything over there once we get our notebook kind of built, and we'll take it from there. And next thing we need to do is we actually need to build our sources for our notebook. Now, unlike Gemini, when we put sources in here, the notebook only uses those sources for authoritative information. Now, it's going to have an underlying model that those sources are added to, which are the basics, how people talk, word association, those kinds of things. But anything authoritative will be in that next level of stuff that we actually add as sources. So we could add a bunch of sources ourselves, but in this case, I'm going to use their deep research feature. Well, it will go out and actually talk to the web, talk to Google search, and build us a bunch of what it thinks are sources for the question we want to ask. And in this case, I'm going to ask this question. How to treat Varroa throughout the year. Now, normally I'd have to give it some more context, like where am I located? What kind of temperatures do I look at? Those kinds of things. But since I set it up in here, I don't have to do that because it's going to always reference this first. Next thing I want to do is I want to set this up for deep research. Fast research, the big differences here are fast is very quick. So if you're looking for a quick answer, that's the way you want to go. But if you're doing research where you want to build a presentation or you really want to get into the hows and the whys of something, you're going to want to do the deep option, but it will take several minutes, maybe 5 to 10 minutes. The good news is I'm not going to make you watch that. I'm going to edit that out so it'll look instantaneous to you, but keep in mind, it does take a little bit of time. And the fast research is only going to kind of hit the top level stuff. Deep is going to kind of go deep. It's going to go to lots and lots of websites trying to get the best sources. We're only going to get brief summaries and basic. Deep is going to be more comprehensive. And just like I said earlier, best for simple question, best for complex open-ended topics. And then this is kind of the workflow. Fast is going to come back pretty much immediately. The deep will work in the background. You can actually close out, go away, do something else, and come back to it. So we've got this set to deep. And if we extend this a little bit, we can actually see that it's set to deep. So let's go ahead and run our search. All right. It is complete. And luckily you didn't have to wait for that to get done. It took a little over 7.5 minutes to do the research and compile all the information, as well as build a report from that information. So I'm going to view that really quick. And then up here we have a very scientific name and it gives us kind of a report from all of our sources that we can then include. You have a lot of control over the tone and the level in your output for some of your studio items and also your questions over here. So don't let the complexity, if you get a particular complex report that's a little more than what you want, don't worry about that. So if you do want to include it, make sure you've got the little check mark down here. Now this is interesting. It's got 52 sources here that are cited, although it will only allow us to do up to 50 sources in a free notebook. And this would be a good time to talk about some of the differences between the free and the paid. You can get access to the paid version if you have a Google One subscription at the time of this recording. That's $20 a month, excuse my coughing. And it gives you more than just access to this. I don't get paid if you get it, so that's totally up to you, obviously. Some of the big ones, though, in particular for NotebookLM, is the number of notebooks you have. For the free, you can do 100 notebooks. For the paid, it's 500. The bigger one that I've noticed is the number of sources. You can have 50 on the free and 300 for the paid version. And then also the number of daily questions, do 50 on the free and 500 for the paid. And there's also a few other things in there as well. So just something good to know. So it's automatically selected 20 sources for us. We could go through here if we wanted to and review these other sources and add them as well by just checking the boxes. And those are all cited in this report. And we have also the ones that are not cited for whatever reason. You can review those and add those. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and import these. I'm not going to add any others. I'm just going to go with the 20 they've got. So we'll go ahead and import it. And it will, after a few minutes, a minute or two, it will have all of these imported and give us a brief summary over here. All right, that's done. That took maybe a minute. I went ahead and cut it out for you so you wouldn't have to sit there and watch it. Now, a couple of things to note here. First off, we've got all our sources here. So if you look down here, you notice that this one wasn't imported for some reason. It says an invalid URL. That can be any number of things. It could be the way the website's configured. It can be that it was blocked. It could be behind a paywall. There's a number of reasons that for the notebook could not import that. So usually what I do when I get those is I just go ahead and remove them. Now, their recommendation from Google on that is if you need it, go ahead and like print that page to a PDF, and then you can add the PDF. And I'm going to show you how you can do that in just a minute. So go ahead and remove that. Now, there is another source that I'd like to add in here, and it is from the Honeybee Health Coalition, and that's the Varroa Management Guide. And if we look here just to kind of confirm, it is not in here. So, yep, I don't see it. So we're going to add this guide. Now, at the time of this recording, it's the 2022 version of the guide. They are like days away from releasing the 2026, I guess, version with some additional information. So if you go to get this guide, it will probably look different. So let's go ahead and add it. So we're going to go up here to Add Sources. And we're going to go to Upload Files because I've already downloaded it to my local computer. You could also post a URL in here, go to your Google Drive, you can copy text, you can search the web to do additional stuff, or you can search your Google Drive to get additional information. So I'm going to go ahead and upload files, and there it is right there. So I'm going to select that and hit Open. And then it's going to sit here for a minute or two and just spin. Now, one thing I've noticed, I don't know if this is a bug with NotebookLM or with my browser, but for some reason it just sits there and spins forever. So in a minute or two, we're going to refresh the screen and we'll see that it's there. But while we're doing that, we'll go ahead and kind of look at what we've got here. So our notebook's untitled, so I'm going to go ahead and give it a title. Varroa Treatment Methods calendar year. You can call it whatever you want to. I'm just going to call it, that's what I'm going to call it for lack of something better. And it's given a thing, and it also says how many sources we've got. And actually it went ahead and it finished this time. So there's the guide right there. And it's in there now as a source, so I can now reference that when I ask questions and I use some of these awesome studio tools. So this is just a real brief summary of what I have in here. Then the next thing I can do is I can I can ask it a question. So in this case, I'm going to ask it this. And you'll notice it says 21 sources. If I uncheck one of these, it'll drop down. Now you may find a situation where you do have a source or two and you don't want to include it for whatever reason. It may be too technical for the answer you're looking to use. It may be not technical enough. You may find that the information is not quite right, those kinds of things. So I'm just going to go ahead and hit search on this. And this is just like Google Gemini, except like I mentioned before, I am only using these references. So I'm only grounded to what sources I have. I'm not grounded to Google search like Gemini is by default. I can't ground to Google Scholar. Now I can when I'm adding sources. When I search the web, I can do that. But as far as this is concerned, I'm only grounded to the stuff right here. So it's going to take a minute or two to compose the information. All right, so now if we go down here, we've got my question, my original question. Create, and I put this using all sources on here because sometimes I'll forget to leave something checked, and that's the only reason I did that. But if you want to, you can leave that off and you can just go by what's checked. So I wanted a sound IPM-based treatment plan for the entire year in the apiary. So expecting to see something throughout the year. So okay, it gives me some foundations of IPM, which is great. And it talks about how we should always try to use non-chemical methods. And these are some of the basic entry ones, you know, resistant genetics, screen bottom board, drone brood removal. And then it starts talking our year. So here's our first January through February. And normally, I mean, I'm a firm believer the beekeeper's year kind of starts in August. So I'd probably start there. But Varroa treatment, as you know, is kind of tricky. Usually if you're heavy in August with your Varroa, there's a good chance that it's going to start hitting those winter bees. So we'd probably want to start a lot earlier in this case. So we're January, February. You know, of course, you don't want to do an alcohol wash. It just talks about that. So he kind of talks about different strategies, those kinds of things. Talks about your goal. And last year we got this saved to a note. Now, if we want to save this report and use it as a source in the future, we can just click right here and this will generate a little note. And now we have that note that we can cut, paste, do whatever we want to with it, and of course delete it. Let's go over to the studio now and talk about all these awesome little tools we have. Now this first one is audio. It actually creates a podcast via AI with two commentators that will discuss whatever sources you want, and as well as any customization you've done. So in this case, we are going to do an overview, and that's a brief overview. And that's just, it's kind of a short. A deep dive, I think by default, I've done it before, about 16 minutes. But in this case, we're going to do kind of a short 4-minute one. So we're going to type in what we want them to talk about. And of course, we have these other ones to critique and then a debate, talking about the different perspectives. But we're just doing the brief overview. And it's, I would like the host to focus on the importance of IPM in Varroa management. So there we go. So we're going to go ahead and generate that. Now, like the others, that's going to take a few minutes. I'm just going to keep on going. And at the end, I will tell you how long the whole process took for everything, to give you an idea. And I will cut out any unnecessary waiting, so you don't have to watch that, of course, either. So the next thing, we're going to go over here to the video. And I'm also going to ask them something a little different here. So I'm going to say, I'd like the host to focus on the best Varroa treatment for each season of the year. And of course, you can choose your visual style. If you do custom, you can actually get in there like I want it to be a blue on white or whatever, but I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to go over here and select the heritage. And we'll go ahead and get that generating. After that, we've got the mind map. And what that does is that takes all of the topics that your sources have and groups them together, and it allows you to click on it and then see just the documents that are talking about that topic. So if you, for instance, are creating a notebook about the history of beekeeping, and you want all of the stuff from detente or root, and you just want to see references to their childhood, you know, it may not do that deep, but it would probably list here, you know, AI root, detente, and then some of the others. So we'll go ahead and click on that, and that takes a minute. There's no real customizations there. Next off, we're going to talk about some of these reports. So we got different styles. We can do briefing, we can do study guide, we can do a blog post, those kinds of things. In this case, I'm going to do a briefing doc. and it's going to create the doc down here, and we will review that as well. So the next off is flashcards. So we're going to go ahead and hit the pencil here, and we've got you can do more, you can do less, you can do kind of standard on the number of cards. Just click off, and then the level of difficulty, of course, this is all subjective, both of these. And we're going to give it also a topic to kind of narrow down, because if you don't narrow it down, you'll get some really weird questions. It just kind of pulls things out of thin air. And when I say thin air, it just kind of pulls random information from these various reports that may have nothing to do with Varroa, just because the data's there. So in this case, I want to focus on Varroa mite life cycle, specific treatment options, as well as monitoring options. So we're going to go ahead and generate that. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to do the quiz. And it's very similar to the flashcards. And we're going to go ahead and go over here. And I'm also going to kind of narrow it down. And we want to just talk about the life cycle in the quiz. So we're going to go ahead and generate that. And by the way, you'll notice it's still generating the audio of the video. We're at about 5.5 minutes right now. So yeah, I've cut out some of the dead space in here. So we've got that going. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to create a slide deck. So we're going to go to slide deck. And this is, you can use this for presentations, those kinds of things. Presenter slides are more pictures and images that we can use in our presentations. And then you'll notice the detail deck is full text and details. So that's something you can email or read on its own. So we'll do both of these with the same question and see how they look. So the first one we'll do is a presenter. And we basically want to spell it out here. So we're going to create a slide deck that details all the chemical treatments for Varroa today. Each treatment should include a description, if it is natural or synthetic, how to use it, and any restrictions such as temperature. If possible, include an image of the retail packaging of the treatment. Now, when I did this before, it pretty much made up these images. And this is sometimes you may create something, and remember I told you earlier it can be inaccurate. AI will do something called hallucinate, and it will make things up. It will look at the information, it will read about the package, and go, okay, this is a package of Apivar or Apigard, and it'll just come up with something, and we'll see that more than likely in the results. The thing about AI, when you're generating like this, you'll get different results every time, so it's a little unpredictable, but we'll see what generates. So we'll go ahead and generate that. And then we'll have to, let's see, so we're generating that slide deck. Let's go ahead and generate another one. And this one will be a detailed deck. And we'll do the same question. So we'll generate that. So now we've got 2 slide decks generating. And it looks like our podcast is done. The video is still working. I'm going to let you listen to the podcast in a few minutes, or part of it. So the next thing we're going to do is a data table. Data table is nice. It creates actually a table of whatever you ask it to. So you want to present your statement or your request in a form that it can actually create a table. So I'm going to go in here, and then I'm going to paste my statement. So I wanted to complete a data table including all known Varroa treatments. Now, you're going to see something in a minute, because, and keep in mind, AI is it's like dealing with a 5-year-old here, right? So I'm not saying chemical treatments. I'm going to get everything more than likely. I'm going to get, screen bottom bores and brood breaks, all of that stuff. Each treatment should include a description, if it's natural or synthetic, how to use it, any restrictions such as temperature or PPE requirements. So we're going to go ahead and generate that as well. All right, so while that is running, okay, so now we're actually going to go and listen to the podcast. It's really freaky how much this sounds like real people talking. If you're going to use this for anything, I would definitely recommend listening to it from start to finish first, because once again, NotebookLM can be inaccurate. AI can be inaccurate sometimes due to hallucinations. I've had cases where I've listened to some of mine. I do logging with NotebookLM, and I'll have another video on that, how I do that. And I log my colony inspections. And I've listened to them, and they said like at one time I had 30 mites per 100 and it was supposed to be 3, and just crazy stuff like that. So let's listen to that for a second.
Failing strategy. All we're doing is creating resistant super mites. First, you have to trade the calendar for data. Seriously. Integrated pest management, IPM for short, is all about ditching those fixed treatment schedules. Instead, you're monitoring rigorously, doing an alcohol wash to get a real head count of the mites. The whole goal is to keep infestations below a certain line. We call it the economic.
So that's pretty cool. Okay, while that's working, we're going to go ahead and look at our table. So we got Formic Pro, we've got Mite Away Quick Strips, and it talks about, what description, what type it is, application method, temperature restrictions, everything we asked it to do. And then we got Apiguard, Oxalic, different kinds of Oxalic, Apivar, Checkmite, Thymo, spray, and then the Viroxan. Now in this case, it did not list any other non-chemical solutions. And that could be because of the way it pulled in its sources. The last time I did this, it listed more than chemical. It listed a lot of, like I said, brood breaks, doing your brood frames, your green drone frames, and those kinds of things. So it's different about every time. So now let's go here and go next. So now let's do the quiz. We have the quiz here, and this is kind of cool. So what is the very first egg a founder's mite lays after being sealed inside a brood cell? Okay, I'm going to give you all a chance to think about that, and then I'm going to answer it. And it's an unfertilized egg that develops in the male. And we just kind of go on. And if you were to finish this, at the end it gives you a little score. So it's really cool, great little study aid there. And then next we've got our flashcards. Very similar. So what is the scientific name for a parasite that primarily causes a honeybee colony death in the US? It's Varroa destructor. There you go. And then you have a little explanation here that you can kind of tie into your chat, and it can give you more information if you don't understand why that is. And it can also check validity of your flashcard if you like, that doesn't sound right, because remember, once again, it can hallucinate. So we've got two distinct stages, and basically that's in the cells and out of the cells. So dispersal or phoretic, and the reproductive. And during which phase does a mated female Varroa mite attach itself to that's the phoretic, or the dispersal phase. So then next off here, we have our briefing doc. That's our report. So we're going to go into here, and it just gives you an executive summary, and then some key takeaways. A briefing doc, it kind of sums up, so if somebody doesn't necessarily feel like they want to read the whole thing, this is kind of like the TLDR, the too long didn't read, and then some key takeaways that you need to remember, and then it goes into all the deep stuff. So this is kind of good if you need a cheat sheet for something. Okay, so the next thing we have here is our mind map. So we're going to go and open that up, and that has all kinds of different things that are cited in some of these same, and some of the same sources that it pulled for Varroa. Now you notice it has other hive pests, so we can open that up, and we've got all these different pests, and we can drill down into these further, and it will actually generate a report for us while we wait. And it talks about all kinds of great stuff. Now if you'll notice, it's having a little trouble with it's still building a report. But then if you mouse over these numbers, you can actually get a call out to the various sources of where it got this information. And you can verify it, like you should always verify. You notice these are all about from the same spot. So yeah, they're all from the pocket guide. So it's a good chance that And this will talk about different things, wax moths and other nuisance. So it's all on the same page or near the same page that the Varroa stuff was on. So let's go back into the studio. Okay, so we're going to wait just a few minutes longer, let it create the slide decks. While it does that, I believe the video is finished. So let me see if I can find it here. Okay, so here we go. Here's the video. We'll watch that while we're...
All right, let's get right into it. Today, we are going to tackle the absolute #1 enemy of honeybees everywhere, the Varroa destructor mite. We're going to walk through a really clear season-by-season battle plan, and we'll focus on the absolute best treatments for each time of year, so you can give your bees the best shot they have at not just surviving, but thriving. Okay, so just look at this. This is what we're all working for, right? A frame just buzzing with healthy, busy bees. It's a beautiful thing.
And then you can see how that would be a good resource for maybe teaching a group or even yourself. You know, you can makes the information easier to assemble. So we'll go ahead and wait till these slide decks are done, and I'll probably cut the time out. And I am sorry if you can hear my dog in the background. And as a time reference, we're at 23 minutes right now. That took about 48 minutes to complete, and we've gotten two of our slide decks here. They're slightly different. This one here talks more in depth about the process of treating, talks about the soft chemicals, gives examples, and kind of talks about how to use them. This would have been the detailed deck. And then the second one is kind of a high-level look at the different treatments and how to use them. So that would have been our presenter slides. So as you can see, they're not that much different. But like I've mentioned several times, NotebookLM can be inaccurate, so you always want to review the output. So that about wraps it up. We've got all these wonderful resources. We've got the summaries. You can just do about anything you want with it. You can drill down here, get more specific. You can ask it to do an outline for a presentation. You can even ask it to do a slide deck there that's more detailed or less detailed, or however you'd like to do it. Now we can talk about the infographic. I had it earlier, but I ran into a problem, and it's kind of a good idea to discuss. One thing you can have is your sources can be a little off. I had one for the IPM pyramid that I was going to use originally, and it just was not sufficient to generate a proper pyramid. It had things in wrong places. So I had to go back to the drawing board, find a couple of other good sources, and create a pyramid from that. And I think I did a pretty good job. So let's go ahead and show you how that's done. So first thing is I have to add my sources over here. And the way we do that is we go up here to add sources. We select websites, and we get our websites, and we paste both of those on there. And I have one from Scientific Beekeeping. That's Randy Oliver's site, if anybody's familiar with that. And this came out just last October. And then I also have something from Pennsylvania State University as well. Both of those really good examples of IPM pyramids that the NotebookLM can use to build me one. So I'll go ahead and insert those over here. And they got inserted. So let's take a look at where they're at. So there's the shift towards bioacaricides. Yeah. And then the other one is up here. I always have trouble finding it because it's got a kind of a common name. I believe it's this. Nope, it's not that one. Anyway, there it is. Methods to control Varroa mites and an integrated pest management approach. All right, so they're both in there. We're good to go. We've got all our sources selected. So we're going to go ahead and create an infographic. So we'll click right here, and you can do one of 3 orientations. I'm going to leave it in landscape, and then you can also adjust the level of detail. You can do concise, detailed, or standard. I'm going to go ahead and just leave it in standard. So let me go ahead and get my request in there. It's pretty short and sweet. We'll paste that in there. We'll go ahead and run it. It takes about 2 minutes. I'm not going to make you wait that long, but I will time it. And when I come back, I'll give you the exact time it took. All right, it's done. It took about 2 minutes, a little over, to about 2 minutes and 5 seconds. So we'll go ahead and go into it. Now, before we even start on our pyramid, we kind of need to know where our threshold is. Our economic threshold is about 2 mites per 100. And that's kind of what this talks about. And we also need to be able to rotate treatments in the chemical aspect, and we'll get to that in a minute. Now, one thing you want to watch out for whenever these AI generated graphics is spelling. In particular, this one spells exceed wrong. So just kind of keep an eye on that. So let's kind of go up the pyramid here. First off, we've got our base with our culture and genetic controls. That's getting rows via SHBs, those kinds of things. Then your next step is to do your mechanical and your physical. So that's things like a screen bottom board, drone brood removal, like the green frames, those kinds of things. You can also, some people like to put it where it's a little warmer, a little more heat. Next off, we've got our soft chemicals, organic acids and whatnot, formic acid, oxalic acid, thymol. And last but not least, we have our hard chemicals. And pretty much all that's out there right now is amitraz, and if you've been following the news, this is 2026 right now, January. Last year, we had a pretty large die-off, 62% for the average beekeeper, and there was a lot of amitraz resistance found in that. And of course, over here, we want to keep our mites watched regularly, and we'll do the alcohol wash to get these numbers over here. So I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope it's helpful for you. Please take a look at our other 2 videos in the series. I've got the one on how to use Gemini, and I'll also do one, a much shorter one on how to handle bee logging through NotebookLM and kind of show you how I do it. So like I said, my name is George, and I hope you have a wonderful day.